The roar of the ocean rises, crashing against the shore with unimaginable force, a wall of water surging inland, tearing through everything in its path. For us, it's a tsunami, a natural disaster explained by science. But for the people of ancient civilizations, standing on those same shores thousands of years ago, what they witnessed wasn't just water, it was something far more mysterious. How did they make sense of such chaos? How did they explain the inexplicable? The answers lie in the stories they told, the gods they worshipped, and the rituals they created to understand the world around them. These interpretations weren't just about survival. They shaped entire cultures, influenced the course of history, and even laid the groundwork for the way we think about natural disasters today. In this video, we'll journey back in time to uncover how ancient civilizations saw the world through a lens of myth, faith, and early science, and how their interpretations still echo in our modern understanding of the forces of nature. Let's step into their world and explore the fascinating ways they made sense of the unimaginable. When faced with the raw power of nature, earthquakes that shook the earth, floods that swallowed entire landscapes, or volcanoes that spewed fire and ash, ancient civilizations sought answers not in science but in stories. Myths became their way of making sense of the chaos, weaving tales of gods and supernatural beings whose actions shaped the world. For the Greeks, Poseidon wasn't just the god of the sea. He was the force behind earthquakes, his mighty trident striking the ground to send tremors across the land. Meanwhile, in Mesoamerica, the Aztecs looked to Tezcatli, the god of fire, whose fiery breath they believed ignited volcanoes. These myths weren't just fanciful explanations, they were survival tools. By attributing disasters to divine will, people found a way to negotiate with the unknown. Rituals, sacrifices, and prayers became methods to appease these powerful beings, offering a sense of control in a world where nature was often merciless. But these stories did more than explain the unexplainable. They shaped entire cultures. The myths surrounding disasters influenced how communities organized themselves, how they built their cities, and even how they prepared for future calamities. For instance, in regions prone to volcanic activity, temples were often constructed near active volcanoes, not out of defiance but as a form of reverence. These sacred spaces served as both a warning and a plea, a way to honor the gods and seek their favor. What's fascinating is how these ancient interpretations still echo in modern times. While we now understand the science behind natural disasters, the emotional and psychological need to make sense of them remains. The stories of Poseidon and Tezcatli remind us that, even in the face of overwhelming forces, humans have always sought meaning and connection. And as we uncover these ancient beliefs, we're not just learning about the past, we're gaining a deeper understanding of how people throughout history have grappled with the fragility of life itself. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers carved their paths through the Fertile Crescent, life was a delicate balance between abundance and devastation. These rivers, often called the cradle of civilization, brought water and rich soil that allowed crops to flourish, but they also carried the threat of catastrophic floods that could wipe out entire communities in moments. For the Mesopotamians, these floods weren't just random acts of nature, they were messages from the gods. The people of Mesopotamia saw the world as deeply intertwined with the divine. When the rivers overflowed, destroying homes and fields, it wasn't simply bad luck. It was a sign that the gods were displeased. They believed that floods were acts of divine retribution, punishments sent to cleanse the earth of human wrongdoing. This idea is powerfully captured in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest surviving stories. In this epic, the gods unleash a great flood to wipe out mankind, sparing only Utnapishtim, who builds an ark to survive. This story isn't just a tale, it's a window into how the Mesopotamians understood their world. For them, natural disasters were more than physical events, they were moral lessons. The floods were a reminder that humanity's actions had consequences and that the gods demanded respect. To avoid divine wrath, the Mesopotamians turned to rituals, offerings, and prayers. Temples became central to their cities, not just as places of worship but as hubs of governance. Kings and priests worked together to interpret the gods' will, ensuring that the community stayed in divine favor. This belief system didn't just shape their spiritual lives, it influenced their laws and leadership. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest known legal codes, reflects this worldview. It's filled with references to divine justice, emphasizing that rulers were accountable not just to their people, but to the gods. In this way, the Mesopotamians' interpretation of floods as divine retribution wasn't just about survival, it was about maintaining order and harmony in a world they believed was governed by higher powers. Their story reminds us that for ancient civilizations, natural disasters weren't just challenges to overcome, they were opportunities to reflect, to seek meaning, and to connect with the divine. The Mesopotamians' response to the floods shows us how deeply their environment shaped their culture, their beliefs, and their understanding of the universe. And perhaps it invites us to consider how we, in our modern world, interpret the forces of nature that still shape our lives today. For the ancient Egyptians, the Nile River wasn't just a source of life, it was a force of divine will. Every year, the river would flood, depositing nutrient-rich silt across the land, transforming barren soil into fertile fields. This annual miracle was the work of Hapi, the god of the Nile's inundation, who was both revered and feared. Hapi's waters brought abundance, ensuring bountiful harvests that sustained the civilization. But when the floods were too strong or too weak, chaos followed. Crops would fail, famine would spread, and the people would question the stability of their world. This duality between the Nile's life-giving gifts and its destructive potential shaped how the Egyptians understood natural disasters. They saw these events not as random acts of nature, but as messages from the gods. At the heart of their worldview was the concept of Mat, the principle of cosmic balance and order. Mat governed everything, the seasons, the rise and fall of the Nile, even the behavior of the people. When disasters struck, it was often interpreted as a sign that Mat had been disrupted. The responsibility for maintaining this balance fell largely on the pharaoh. As the intermediary between the gods and the people, the pharaoh's actions or inactions could directly influence the natural world. A weak or unjust ruler might anger the gods, leading to floods, droughts, or other calamities. This belief wasn't just philosophical, it had real-world consequences. Rituals, offerings, and even agricultural practices were designed to appease the gods and restore balance. The Egyptians built elaborate temples, conducted ceremonies, and meticulously measured the Nile's water levels, all in an effort to predict and mitigate disasters. This intricate relationship between the Nile, the gods, and the concept of Mat reveals a profound understanding of the natural world. The Egyptians didn't see themselves as separate from nature. They were part of a delicate, interconnected system. Their interpretations of disasters were deeply tied to their environment, their religion, and their sense of social order. And while their explanations might seem mystical to us today, they reflect a universal human desire to make sense of the unpredictable forces that shape our lives. Moving forward, we'll explore how other ancient civilizations interpreted natural disasters not just as divine messages, but as omens and warnings that carried profound cultural and spiritual significance. In ancient China, the natural world was far more than just a backdrop to human life. It was a mirror reflecting the will of the heavens. Earthquakes, droughts, and floods weren't merely random acts of nature. They were seen as powerful messages from the gods, signaling their approval or, more often, their displeasure. Central to this belief was the concept of the mandate of heaven, a divine authority granted to the emperor to rule justly and maintain harmony. But if the heavens sent disasters, it was a clear sign that the emperor had lost this sacred mandate. This idea wasn't just philosophical, it had real-world consequences. Entire dynasties could rise or fall based on how these omens were interpreted. To understand these events, the ancient Chinese developed intricate systems of divination like the I Ching or Book of Changes. This ancient text wasn't just a tool for predicting the future, it was a guide for understanding the balance of forces in the universe. By interpreting patterns in nature, such as the movement of stars or the cracking of tortoise shells, scholars and rulers believed they could decode the intentions of the gods. These practices weren't limited to the elite, they permeated every level of society, shaping how ordinary people understood their world. The belief in omens reinforced the idea that humans were deeply connected to the natural world, and that maintaining this harmony was essential for survival. This way of thinking didn't just influence spiritual practices, it shaped politics and governance in profound ways. When a natural disaster struck, it wasn't just a call for prayers or sacrifices, it was a wake-up call for the emperor to reflect on his rule. Were the people suffering because of his missteps? Had he neglected his duties to maintain the balance between heaven and earth? These questions weren't abstract, they could lead to sweeping reforms, changes in leadership, or even the fall of a dynasty. The mandate of heaven wasn't just a lofty ideal, it was a practical framework that held rulers accountable to both their people and the cosmos. But beyond politics, this worldview also shaped Chinese philosophy, emphasizing the importance of living in harmony with nature. Thinkers like Confucius and Laozi built on these ideas, teaching that balance and order were essential not just in the natural world, but in human relationships and governance as well. The idea that disasters were warnings from the heavens wasn't just about fear, it was a reminder of humanity's responsibility to maintain equilibrium in all things. This belief in cosmic harmony continues to influence Chinese culture even today, a testament to the enduring power of these ancient interpretations. So, what does this tell us about how the ancient Chinese saw their world? It reveals a society deeply attuned to the rhythms of nature, where every earthquake, every flood carried a message. These interpretations weren't just about survival, they were about understanding humanity's place in a vast, interconnected universe. And perhaps in a world increasingly disconnected from nature, there's something timeless in this ancient wisdom, a reminder that we, too, are part of a larger balance. The Mayans saw the world as a tapestry woven with threads of cosmic order and earthly chaos. For them, natural disasters weren't random acts of destruction but intricate parts of a grand celestial rhythm. Their understanding of the universe was deeply tied to the movements of the stars, planets, and gods. They believed that events like droughts, hurricanes, and even volcanic eruptions were not isolated incidents but rather signs from the heavens echoing the will of their deities. At the heart of their worldview was the Mayan long count calendar, a complex system that tracked time in cycles spanning thousands of years. This calendar wasn't just a tool for marking days, it was a blueprint for understanding the universe. The Mayans used it to predict periods of creation and destruction, believing that each era would end with catastrophic events before a new cycle began. Their meticulous records of astronomical phenomena, like the paths of Venus or solar eclipses, were directly linked to earthly disasters. For example, they might interpret a drought as a consequence of a god's displeasure, signaled by the alignment of certain stars. This cyclical view of time and disaster reveals how deeply intertwined the Mayans felt with the natural world. They didn't see themselves as separate from nature but as part of a larger cosmic order. Their rituals, sacrifices, and ceremonies were attempts to maintain balance and appease the gods, ensuring the continuation of their world. Even in the face of catastrophe, their belief in cycles offered a sense of hope, a reminder that destruction was always followed by renewal. The Mayans' approach to natural disasters reflects a profound respect for the forces of nature and a desire to understand them. Their ability to connect celestial events with earthly phenomena shows an advanced level of observation and interpretation, blending science and spirituality in a way that still fascinates us today. While their world may seem distant from our modern understanding, it offers a powerful reminder of humanity's enduring quest to make sense of the world around us. Their legacy invites us to consider how ancient civilizations found meaning in chaos, seeing patterns where we might see randomness. And as we move forward in our exploration, we'll see how another great empire, the Romans, grappled with their own interpretations of natural disasters, shaping their culture and history in profound ways. For the ancient Romans, the world was alive with the presence of gods. Every storm, earthquake, and volcanic eruption was a message from the divine. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, burying the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum under ash and fire, many saw it as a clear sign of Jupiter's displeasure. The Romans believed such disasters were not random acts of nature but deliberate warnings or punishments from the gods. Earthquakes shook the ground as a sign of Neptune's unrest, while plagues were often seen as Apollo's wrath unleashed upon the people. These interpretations weren't just spiritual, they were deeply political. Roman leaders like Augustus used these events to their advantage, framing themselves as mediators between the gods and the people. They would perform elaborate rituals, sacrifices, and public ceremonies to appease the gods and restore balance. But it wasn't just about calming divine anger, it was also about maintaining control. By positioning themselves as the ones who could interpret and respond to these signs, Roman leaders reinforced their authority and justified their rule. This intertwining of religion and politics became a cornerstone of Roman society, shaping everything from military campaigns to social reforms. The legacy of these beliefs can still be felt today, as we see how ancient interpretations of natural disasters influenced not just Roman culture, but the broader understanding of humanity's relationship with the forces of nature. As we journey further into the ancient world, we find that Greek thinkers were beginning to challenge the mythological narratives that dominated their culture. While many Greeks still turned to the gods to explain the fury of earthquakes, storms, and volcanic eruptions, a growing number of philosophers started to seek answers rooted in observation and reason. Among them, Aristotle and Thales stand out as pioneers of early scientific thought. Aristotle, for instance, theorized that earthquakes were caused by powerful underground winds trapped within the earth, a concept that, while not entirely accurate, showed a remarkable attempt to understand natural phenomena through logic rather than legend. Meanwhile, Thales proposed an even more striking idea, that the earth itself floated on water, and disturbances in this balance were what caused the ground to shake. These theories might seem simplistic by today's standards, but they represented a monumental shift and effort to move beyond the realm of myth and into the realm of rational inquiry. What's fascinating is how these early Greek thinkers didn't entirely abandon mythology. Instead, they wove it into their scientific explanations, creating a unique blend of tradition and innovation. This dual approach didn't just satisfy the curiosity of their contemporaries, it laid the intellectual foundation for the scientific methods we rely on today. By daring to question the divine explanations of their time, Aristotle, Thales, and others opened the door to a new way of thinking, one that sought to uncover the natural laws governing our world. This transition from myth to reason wasn't just a Greek phenomenon, though. As we turn our attention to ancient India, we'll see how another civilization grappled with the same questions, blending spirituality with early scientific insights in ways that were both similar to and distinct from the Greek approach. The story of how humans have sought to understand natural disasters is as much about the evolution of thought as it is about the disasters themselves. And as we'll soon discover, every culture brought its own unique perspective to the table, enriching our collective understanding of the forces that shape our world. In ancient India, the natural world wasn't just a backdrop to human life. It was deeply intertwined with the spiritual and moral fabric of society. Here, natural disasters were more than random events. They were seen as profound messages from the cosmos. Floods, droughts, and earthquakes weren't merely acts of nature but reflections of karma, the universal principle of cause and effect. According to this worldview, every action, whether by an individual or a community, rippled through the fabric of existence, influencing the balance of dharma or moral order. When disasters struck, they were often interpreted as corrections or reminders, urging people to realign with their ethical and spiritual duties. The Vedas and Upanishads, some of the oldest sacred texts of India, offer fascinating insights into this perspective. These writings describe natural phenomena as expressions of divine will, where the elements themselves, earth, water, fire, and air, were seen as agents of cosmic justice. For instance, a devastating flood might be interpreted as a cleansing act, washing away the accumulated misdeeds of a society. Similarly, a drought could symbolize a withdrawal of divine favor, prompting reflection and repentance. This belief in the interconnectedness of all life shaped not only spiritual practices but also environmental stewardship. Ancient Indians often approached nature with reverence, seeing it as a living entity that responded to human actions. What's particularly striking is how these interpretations differ from those of other ancient cultures. While some civilizations viewed disasters as the wrath of capricious gods, Indian thought placed the responsibility squarely on human behavior. It wasn't about appeasing angry deities, but about understanding the consequences of one's actions and striving for harmony with the natural and spiritual worlds. This perspective fostered a unique relationship between people and their environment, where respect for nature wasn't just a practical necessity but a moral imperative. As we delve deeper into the ways ancient civilizations made sense of natural disasters, it's clear that these interpretations weren't just about explaining the unexplainable. They were about finding meaning and guiding human behavior. The idea that our actions could influence the very forces of nature is both humbling and empowering, offering a timeless reminder of our responsibility to the world around us. The Aztec civilization, flourishing in the heart of what is now Mexico, saw the world through a lens of divine interconnectedness. For them, natural disasters were not random acts of chaos but powerful messages from the gods. Earthquakes, droughts, and floods were interpreted as urgent calls for action, signs that the delicate balance of the universe was at risk. At the center of this belief was the idea that the sun, the life-giving force of their world, required constant nourishment to rise each day. Without it, they feared eternal darkness. To prevent such a catastrophe, the Aztecs turned to a practice that might seem unimaginable today: human sacrifice. This wasn't an act of cruelty, but a profound act of devotion. They believed that offering the most precious gift, human life, would appease the gods and ensure the sun's return. The Aztecs saw themselves as caretakers of the cosmic order, tasked with maintaining harmony between the earthly and divine realms. Their rituals, often involving elaborate ceremonies and symbolic gestures, were deeply rooted in their understanding of nature's cycles. Droughts, for instance, were seen as the gods withholding rain, a reminder that life itself depended on their favor. By offering sacrifices, the Aztecs believed they could restore equilibrium and secure the survival of their people. This worldview reveals a fascinating blend of fear, reverence, and responsibility. The Aztecs didn't see natural disasters as punishments, but as opportunities to reaffirm their bond with the divine. Their response was both a plea and a promise, an acknowledgement of their dependence on the gods and a commitment to uphold their end of the cosmic bargain. It's a perspective that underscores how deeply they felt the weight of their role in the universe. From the towering temples of Tenochtitlan to the intricate calendars that tracked celestial events, every aspect of Aztec life reflected this connection. Their interpretation of natural disasters wasn't just about survival, it was about sustaining the very fabric of existence. And as we move from the Aztecs to another ancient culture, we'll see how different societies found their own ways to make sense of the unpredictable forces of nature. For the Polynesian people, the ocean wasn't just a vast expanse of water. It was a living, breathing force governed by powerful deities who could either bless or curse their lives. Imagine living on small islands surrounded by endless seas, where every storm or earthquake could mean life or death. It's no wonder that Polynesian cultures saw natural disasters as the actions of gods, not random acts of nature. Take Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of volcanoes, for example. When lava flowed or the ground shook, it wasn't just geological activity, it was Pele's fiery temper, a reminder of her presence and power. Similarly, Tangaroa, the Maori god of the ocean, ruled the waves. A sudden tsunami or a violent hurricane wasn't just bad weather, it was Tangaroa's way of making his will known. These beliefs weren't just stories, they were central to how Polynesians lived and survived. Their seafaring lifestyle depended on understanding and respecting the forces of nature. To navigate safely across thousands of miles of open ocean, they relied on more than just stars and currents. They turned to rituals and chants to appease the gods. Before setting sail, Polynesian voyagers would perform ceremonies to honor Tangaroa, asking for calm seas and safe passage. If a volcano erupted or a storm struck, it was seen as a sign that the gods were displeased, and more offerings or rituals were needed to restore balance. This deep connection to the gods also shaped how Polynesians explored and settled new lands. They didn't just set out blindly into the unknown, they carried their beliefs with them, using spiritual guidance alongside their incredible navigational skills. When they discovered new islands, it wasn't just luck, it was the favor of the gods. These interpretations of natural disasters weren't just about fear. They were about understanding their place in the world and finding harmony with the forces that could so easily disrupt their lives. This blend of faith and practicality helped Polynesians thrive in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. In ancient Japan, the natural world was alive with spiritual energy, a place where the kami, or sacred spirits, resided in every mountain, river, and tree. These kami weren't just passive observers, they were active forces, shaping the world and influencing the lives of those who lived within it. When earthquakes shook the ground, typhoons tore through the land, or volcanoes erupted with fiery fury, the Japanese people saw these events not as random acts of nature, but as deliberate actions of the kami. These powerful spirits were believed to express their will through such phenomena, sometimes as warnings, other times as tests of human devotion. To maintain harmony with these deities, rituals and offerings became essential. Farmers would pray for calm weather before planting crops, fishermen would seek the kami's favor before venturing out to sea, and entire communities would come together to perform ceremonies during times of crisis. The Shinto religion, deeply rooted in the reverence for nature, taught that humans were not separate from the natural world but an integral part of it. This philosophy shaped every aspect of life, from the design of shrines nestled in forests to the careful placement of homes to avoid offending the spirits of the land. Even today, traces of these ancient beliefs can be seen in Japan's approach to disaster preparedness. The respect for nature's power, ingrained over centuries, has fostered a culture of resilience and adaptation. Traditional wooden buildings, designed to sway with earthquakes rather than resist them, reflect this deep understanding of natural forces. Similarly, the practice of planting trees to stabilize soil and protect against landslides echoes the ancient wisdom of living in harmony with the environment. This profound connection between the spiritual and the natural world offers a fascinating glimpse into how ancient cultures sought to make sense of the unpredictable. As we move forward, we'll explore how other civilizations, like those in ancient Africa, interpreted the forces of nature in their own unique ways. For countless African civilizations, the natural world was far more than a backdrop to human life. It was a living, breathing force intimately tied to the spiritual realm. When droughts parched the land or floods swept away homes, these events weren't seen as random acts of nature. Instead, they were interpreted as powerful messages from ancestral spirits or deities, a way for the unseen world to communicate with the living. Imagine a community watching the skies, waiting for rain that never comes. Instead of despair, they might have turned inward, asking themselves, "What have we done to upset our ancestors? How can we restore harmony?" Droughts, floods, and even plagues of locusts were often viewed as signs of divine displeasure, warnings that something in the community needed to change. These disasters weren't just environmental challenges, they were spiritual ones, calling for introspection and action. To address them, African cultures developed intricate rituals, dances, and offerings designed to communicate with the spirits. These practices weren't mere superstitions. They were deeply rooted in a worldview that saw humans, nature, and the divine as interconnected. A dance wasn't just a performance, it was a prayer, a plea for balance and renewal. This profound connection to the natural and spiritual worlds also found its way into art and music. Sculptures and masks often depicted ancestral spirits, serving as bridges between the living and the divine. Music wasn't just entertainment, it was a form of spiritual communication with rhythms and melodies designed to honor the ancestors and invite their guidance. Even social structures were shaped by these beliefs. Elders, seen as closer to the ancestors, held significant authority, guiding their communities through times of crisis with rituals aimed at appeasing the spirits and restoring harmony. What's remarkable about these interpretations is their underlying philosophy, a deep respect for the natural world and an understanding that humans are not separate from it. Every flood, every drought, every swarm of locusts was a reminder of this delicate balance, a call to live in harmony with both the earth and the unseen forces that governed it. These beliefs weren't just about survival, they were about thriving, about finding meaning in the natural world and ensuring that future generations could do the same. For the Inca, the natural world wasn't just a backdrop to their lives, it was a living, breathing entity they revered and depended upon. At the heart of their world was Pachamama, the earth goddess who embodied the land, fertility, and the cycles of life. To the Inca, Pachamama wasn't just a distant deity, she was a presence in every mountain, river, and field. They believed that when natural disasters struck, earthquakes shaking the ground, landslides burying villages, or droughts withering crops, it was a sign that their relationship with Pachamama was out of balance. These events weren't random acts of nature, they were messages urging the Inca to restore harmony through offerings, rituals, and respect. One of the most striking examples of this philosophy in action was their approach to agriculture. The Inca were masterful engineers, creating terraced fields that clung to steep mountainsides and intricate irrigation systems that channeled water across vast distances. But these weren't just feats of engineering, they were acts of reverence. Every terrace and canal was designed to work with the land, not against it. They understood that forcing nature to bend to their will could lead to disaster, so instead they sought to align their practices with the rhythms of the earth. It's a level of environmental awareness that feels remarkably modern even today. This deep connection to the land also shaped their rituals. When disaster struck, the Inca didn't just rebuild, they sought to heal their relationship with Pachamama. Offerings of food, drink, and precious goods were made, often buried in the earth as a gesture of gratitude and humility. These rituals weren't just about appeasing a deity, they were about acknowledging humanity's place within a larger, interconnected system. It's a perspective that reminds us of the delicate balance between humans and the environment, a balance that, when disrupted, could have profound consequences. The Incas' reverence for Pachamama and their commitment to environmental harmony offer a fascinating glimpse into how one civilization navigated the challenges of living in a world shaped by forces beyond their control. But they weren't alone in their interpretations of natural disasters. Across the globe, other cultures developed their own ways of understanding these events, each shaped by their unique beliefs and environments. Next, we'll explore how the ancient Celts viewed the forces of nature and how their interpretations reflected their connection to the spiritual and natural worlds. For the ancient Celts, the natural world was alive with spirits, each tree, river, and stone pulsating with unseen energy. They believed that natural disasters like storms or floods weren't random acts of nature but deliberate messages from these spirits or the gods themselves. Imagine standing in a sacred grove surrounded by towering oaks, their branches whispering secrets of the divine. To the Celts, these groves weren't just beautiful places, they were portals to the spiritual realm where the veil between the human and the divine grew thin. When disaster struck, it was seen as a sign that the spirits were displeased, perhaps rituals had been neglected, or the balance between humanity and nature had been disrupted. The community would come together, offering sacrifices or performing ceremonies to appease these powerful forces. Springs, groves, and standing stones became focal points for these rituals, acting as both spiritual anchors and reminders of humanity's connection to the earth. This deep reverence for nature didn't just shape their religious practices, it seeped into every aspect of Celtic life. Their art, filled with intricate patterns inspired by the natural world, reflected this belief in the interconnectedness of all things. Myths and legends often featured deities tied to specific natural elements, like rivers or storms, reinforcing the idea that the divine was everywhere, in every gust of wind and every drop of rain. What's fascinating is how these interpretations reveal a world view where humans weren't separate from nature but deeply intertwined with it. While other cultures might have seen natural disasters as the wrath of a distant god, the Celts saw them as a call to action, a reminder to live in harmony with the world around them. This perspective, rooted in both fear and respect, offers a unique lens through which to understand how ancient peoples made sense of the unpredictable forces of nature. As we move forward, we'll see how these Celtic beliefs compare to those of other cultures, each with their own way of interpreting the same storms, floods, and earthquakes. How did the Greeks or the Egyptians explain these events? And what can these ancient interpretations teach us about humanity's enduring quest to understand the world? Let's find out. In the face of natural disasters, ancient civilizations often turned to a select group of individuals believed to hold the keys to understanding the divine will. Priests and shamans stood at the crossroads of the earthly and the spiritual, serving as interpreters of the chaos unfolding around them. These figures were not just religious leaders, they were the bridge between the people and the forces that governed their world. Through rituals, divination, and prophecy, they sought to decode the messages hidden within earthquakes, floods, and storms, transforming fear into meaning. Take, for example, the ancient Mesopotamians. When the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flooded, priests would perform elaborate ceremonies to appease the gods, believing that the water's fury was a sign of divine displeasure. Similarly, in the Andes, shamans interpreted volcanic eruptions as warnings from the mountain spirits, guiding their communities to make offerings or relocate to safer grounds. These interpretations weren't just spiritual exercises, they had real-world consequences. Kings and rulers often relied on these religious figures to justify their decisions, whether it was declaring war, redistributing resources, or instituting new law. But the influence of priests and shamans extended far beyond politics. Their interpretations seeped into the very fabric of daily life, shaping cultural practices and social norms. In ancient Egypt, for instance, the annual flooding of the Nile was seen as a gift from the gods, and priests played a central role in predicting and celebrating this life-giving event. Their rituals reinforced the idea that the natural world was deeply intertwined with the divine, creating a sense of order and purpose in an otherwise unpredictable environment. What's fascinating is how these interpretations reveal a universal human desire to make sense of the uncontrollable. Whether through prayer, sacrifice, or prophecy, ancient societies sought to exert some form of influence over the forces that threatened their survival. And while their methods may seem foreign to us today, the underlying impulse to find meaning in chaos remains deeply relatable. This interplay between the spiritual and the practical offers a unique window into how our ancestors navigated the challenges of their world, setting the stage for the cultural and artistic expressions that followed. Ancient civilizations didn't just record natural disasters in history books, they immortalized them in art and literature, transforming catastrophic events into stories and symbols that shaped their worldview. For the Greeks, natural disasters were often seen as the wrath of the gods. Take the story of Poseidon, god of the sea, who is said to send earthquakes and floods when angered. Greek tragedies, like those of Aeschylus and Sophocles, frequently used these divine punishments as central themes, weaving them into tales of hubris and redemption. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were cautionary tales, teaching people to respect the gods and the natural world. Moving across the globe, the Maya also turned to art and writing to make sense of their environment. Mayan codices, intricate books painted on bark paper, often depicted natural disasters like droughts or hurricanes as battles between cosmic forces. These weren't random acts of nature, but deliberate interventions by gods like Chok, the rain deity, who controlled the life-giving rain. By recording these events, the Maya didn't just document history, they preserved their spiritual understanding of the world, ensuring that future generations would remember the delicate balance between humanity and the divine. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh offers another profound example. This epic poem, one of the oldest known works of literature, includes a flood story strikingly similar to later biblical narratives. The Mesopotamians saw floods as a divine reset, a way for the gods to cleanse the earth and start anew. Through this story, they grappled with the chaos of nature, finding meaning in the idea of renewal and survival. These artistic and literary works weren't just about explaining the unexplainable. They were tools for resilience. By embedding their interpretations of disasters into cultural narratives, ancient societies found ways to cope with the fear and uncertainty these events brought. They passed down lessons, warnings, and even hope, ensuring that their understanding of the world endured long after the disasters themselves had faded into memory. The remnants of ancient civilizations offer us more than just crumbling stones and faded carvings. They provide a window into how our ancestors made sense of the world's most destructive forces. Among the most compelling discoveries are the temples, inscriptions, and artifacts that show how these societies interpreted natural disasters. Take Pompeii, for instance. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, the city was buried under layers of ash, preserving not just buildings but the lives of its people in heartbreaking detail. Among the ruins, archaeologists have found frescoes and inscriptions that suggest the Romans saw the eruption as a warning from the gods, a punishment for neglecting their rituals. This perspective shaped their response as they rebuilt and rededicated temples to appease the deities they believed controlled their fate. Similarly, the Mayans left behind intricate carvings and stelae that tell a different but equally fascinating story. In regions prone to drought, their artwork often depicts elaborate ceremonies and sacrifices meant to summon rain or prevent famine. These rituals weren't just acts of desperation. They were deeply rooted in the Mayan worldview, where natural disasters were seen as disruptions in the balance between the human and divine realms. By studying these artifacts, we can see how ancient societies didn't just react to disasters, they sought to understand and influence them through their beliefs and practices. But what's truly remarkable is how these interpretations weren't just confined to the past. They laid the groundwork for how we approach disaster preparedness today. While we no longer attribute volcanic eruptions or droughts to the whims of gods, the idea of anticipating and mitigating disasters has its roots in these ancient practices. The next time you hear about early warning systems or community drills, remember that the seeds of these strategies were planted thousands of years ago by people who, in their own way, were trying to make sense of an unpredictable world. The echoes of ancient interpretations of natural disasters ripple through time, leaving a profound mark on how we understand and respond to the forces of nature today. For centuries, civilizations like the Greeks, Mayans, and Hindus saw earthquakes, floods, and storms as messages from the gods, warnings, punishments, or tests of humanity's worth. While modern science offers us a clearer picture of the mechanisms behind these events, the legacy of these ancient beliefs still lingers in our collective consciousness. Take the concept of karma, for example. Rooted in ancient Indian philosophy, the idea that actions have consequences that ripple through the cosmos has shaped how some cultures perceive natural disasters even now. In parts of South Asia, a devastating flood or earthquake might still be viewed through the lens of moral accountability, a reminder of the interconnectedness between human behavior and the natural world. Similarly, the notion of divine retribution, once used to explain volcanic eruptions or plagues, persists in some religious interpretations of catastrophic events today. But it's not just metaphysical ideas that have endured. Ancient rituals and practices aimed at appeasing the gods or restoring cosmic balance have evolved into modern disaster preparedness strategies. The annual flooding of the Nile, for instance, was once seen as a gift from the gods, but it also taught the ancient Egyptians to plan and adapt. Their sophisticated irrigation systems and grain storage methods laid the groundwork for modern engineering solutions to mitigate flood damage. Even the Maya, who built their cities with celestial alignments to honor their gods, inadvertently developed architectural techniques that could withstand earthquakes. Their understanding of the natural world, though steeped in spirituality, produced practical innovations that inspire modern architects and engineers. Today, we might not build temples to appease the gods, but we do design structures to withstand nature's fury, carrying forward the wisdom of our ancestors in ways they could never have imagined. What's fascinating is how these ancient perspectives continue to shape not just practical solutions, but also the way we emotionally process disasters. In times of crisis, people often turn to rituals, prayers, or communal gatherings, echoes of the same coping mechanisms used by ancient societies. Whether it's lighting candles after a tragedy or seeking solace in shared stories, these practices remind us that, deep down, we're still connected to the same fundamental human need to make sense of the chaos around us. So, while we may no longer attribute earthquakes to Poseidon's wrath or volcanic eruptions to Peel's fury, the legacy of these ancient interpretations endures. They've shaped our cultural narratives, influenced our scientific progress, and even guided how we emotionally navigate the unpredictability of the natural world. And in that sense, the voices of the past still speak to us, offering wisdom that transcends time and technology. For thousands of years, humanity has grappled with the same question: why do natural disasters happen? But the way we've answered that question has shifted dramatically over time. Ancient civilizations often saw disasters as the work of gods or spirits' punishment for human misdeeds, a sign of divine anger, or even a cosmic battle between supernatural forces. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in ancient Rome, for example, was interpreted by many as the wrath of Vulcan, the god of fire. Similarly, the Aztecs believed earthquakes were the result of their gods shaking the earth in displeasure. These interpretations weren't just stories, they were frameworks for understanding a chaotic world, offering a sense of order and meaning, even in the face of destruction. Fast forward to today, and science has given us a very different lens. We now know that natural disasters are the result of geological, meteorological, or environmental processes, earthquakes caused by tectonic plates shifting, hurricanes fueled by warm ocean waters, or floods from heavy rainfall. These explanations are rooted in observable data and rigorous study, not myth or legend. Yet, despite this shift, there's a fascinating parallel between ancient and modern thinking. Both approaches, though radically different, aim to achieve the same thing: understanding the forces that shape our world and finding ways to protect ourselves from their impact. Think about it this way: ancient societies built temples and performed rituals to appease the gods, hoping to prevent future disasters. Today, we build earthquake-resistant structures, develop early warning systems, and study climate patterns to predict and prepare for catastrophic events. The tools and methods have changed, but the underlying goal, gaining control over the uncontrollable, remains strikingly similar. This comparison reveals something profound about humanity. Our need to make sense of the world around us is timeless. Whether through prayer or physics, we're driven by a shared desire to survive, adapt, and thrive. But the story doesn't end there. Beyond the practical implications, there's a psychological dimension to how we interpret disasters. The way ancient people saw these events as divine interventions offered not just explanations but also emotional comfort. If a disaster was caused by the gods, then perhaps it could be avoided by living rightly or performing the correct rituals. In modern times, scientific explanations can provide a different kind of comfort: the reassurance that even if we can't control nature, we can at least understand it and prepare for its unpredictability. This evolution in thought isn't just about facts, it's about how we cope with fear, uncertainty, and the fragility of life. As we dive deeper into the psychological impact of disaster interpretation, it's worth considering how these ancient and modern perspectives continue to shape our responses to natural events today. How do our beliefs about why disasters happen influence the way we react to them? And what can the past teach us about resilience in the face of the unknown? These are the questions we'll explore next as we unravel the human connection to the forces that shape our world. For ancient civilizations, natural disasters weren't just physical events, they were deeply tied to the human psyche. Imagine living in a world where earthquakes, floods, or volcanic eruptions seemed utterly inexplicable. Without the scientific knowledge we have today, people turned to their beliefs to make sense of the chaos. These interpretations didn't just explain what was happening, they shaped how entire societies processed fear, grief, and uncertainty. Take, for example, the ancient Greeks. They often viewed disasters as acts of divine retribution, punishments from the gods for human misdeeds. While this might sound harsh to us today, for them, it offered a kind of psychological relief. If a disaster was the result of angered deities, it meant there was a reason behind the suffering. It wasn't random or meaningless. This belief gave people a framework to understand tragedy, and even a way to prevent future calamities by appeasing the gods through rituals or sacrifices. Similarly, in Mesoamerican cultures, natural disasters were often seen as part of a larger cosmic cycle. The Aztecs, for instance, believed in the concept of recurring world ages, each ending in destruction. While this might seem bleak, it also provided a sense of inevitability and order. If destruction was part of a natural cycle, then rebuilding and renewal were equally inevitable. This perspective fostered resilience, encouraging communities to come together and rebuild rather than succumb to despair. These belief systems also played a crucial role in maintaining social cohesion. When disaster struck, shared interpretations of the event united people under a common narrative. Rituals, prayers, and communal activities became ways to process collective trauma and reaffirm cultural identity. In a sense, these practices acted as early forms of group therapy, helping individuals feel less alone in their suffering. But what about the psychological toll of these beliefs? On one hand, they provided comfort and a sense of control. On the other, they could also instill fear and perpetuate cycles of guilt. For instance, the idea that disasters were punishments might have led some to blame themselves or others, creating tension within communities. Yet, even these challenges had a silver lining. They spurred introspection and moral reflection, encouraging people to strive for harmony with both the divine and each other. In many ways, the psychological resilience of ancient civilizations was deeply intertwined with their interpretations of disaster. By finding meaning in the chaos, they not only survived but also thrived, passing down stories, rituals, and lessons that shaped their descendants for generations. These ancient frameworks remind us that, even in the face of overwhelming uncertainty, the human need to find purpose and connection remains a powerful force. Natural disasters, as devastating as they were, became more than just moments of destruction for ancient civilizations. They became opportunities for cultural resilience and adaptation. When faced with catastrophic events like earthquakes, floods, or volcanic eruptions, these societies didn't simply crumble. Instead, they found ways to make sense of the chaos, often weaving these events into their myths, rituals, and communal practices. These stories weren't just tales to pass the time. They were tools for survival, offering explanations for the unexplainable and fostering a sense of hope and continuity. Take, for example, the ancient Mesopotamians. When the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flooded unpredictably, they didn't see it as random destruction. Instead, they interpreted these floods as the will of their gods, a divine reminder to live in harmony with nature. This belief wasn't just spiritual, it was practical. It led to innovations in agriculture, like the development of irrigation systems, and inspired rituals that brought communities together to rebuild and prepare for the next challenge. Similarly, the Minoans of Crete, who experienced frequent earthquakes, incorporated seismic activity into their religious practices. They built their temples with flexible materials and designed structures that could withstand tremors, showing a remarkable blend of spiritual and practical adaptation. Their myths, too, reflected this resilience, with stories of gods shaking the earth as a test of their faith and endurance. These ancient interpretations didn't just help societies survive, they allowed them to thrive. By embedding natural disasters into their cultural fabric, they transformed fear into a source of strength. Rituals became acts of unity, myths became blueprints for rebuilding, and communal practices ensured that no one was left behind. This cultural resilience wasn't just about bouncing back, it was about moving forward stronger and more prepared than before. This ability to adapt and rebuild highlights the ingenuity of ancient civilizations, but it also raises an important question. How did these interpretations shape their relationship with the environment? Next, we'll explore how ancient societies turned their understanding of natural disasters into a form of environmental stewardship, balancing reverence for nature with practical solutions to protect their world. Imagine living in a world where every flood, earthquake, or volcanic eruption was seen as a message from the gods, a reminder of humanity's place within the natural order. For many ancient cultures, this wasn't just a poetic idea, it was the foundation of how they lived. Take the Inca civilization, for example. High in the Andes Mountains, they built an agricultural system that was as ingenious as it was sustainable. Their terraced farms weren't just practical solutions to steep terrain. They were a deliberate effort to work with the land, not against it. By creating these terraces, the Inca prevented soil erosion, conserved water, and cultivated crops in harmony with the natural environment. It was a way of saying, we respect the earth and we will care for it. Then there's Japan, where the concept of kami spirits or deities that inhabit natural elements like rivers, trees, and mountains shaped their relationship with the environment. For the Japanese, a natural disaster wasn't just a random event. It was a reminder of the power and will of these spirits. This belief led to practices that honored nature, such as the careful management of forests and the creation of sacred spaces where humans and the natural world could coexist peacefully. The idea wasn't to dominate nature, but to live in balance with it, a philosophy that still resonates in modern Japan's approach to environmentalism. These ancient practices weren't just about survival, they were about stewardship. They show us that our ancestors understood something profound, that the earth is not just a resource to exploit, but a living system to respect and preserve. In a world grappling with climate change and environmental degradation, these lessons feel more relevant than ever. What can we learn from the Inca's terraces or Japan's reverence for kami? Perhaps it's the understanding that sustainability isn't just a modern buzzword. It's a timeless principle, one that connects us to the wisdom of those who came before. By looking to these ancient traditions, we might find new ways to live in harmony with the planet, just as they did. The ways ancient civilizations made sense of natural disasters tell a story of human ingenuity and determination. When faced with the raw power of earthquakes, floods, or volcanic eruptions, they didn't just see destruction. They saw meaning. Myths and legends emerged, weaving these events into the fabric of their cultures. Rituals and offerings became ways to appease the gods or spirits believed to control the forces of nature. But it wasn't just about fear or superstition. These interpretations also laid the groundwork for early scientific thought, as people began observing patterns and seeking explanations. What's remarkable is how these ancient perspectives shaped entire societies. Leaders used these beliefs to guide their people, creating laws and systems to protect against future disasters. Communities came together, united by shared stories and practices that reinforced their collective identity. In a world without modern technology, these interpretations weren't just about survival, they were about finding purpose and connection in the chaos. Today, we might have satellites and seismographs, but the questions ancient civilizations grappled with still resonate. How do we make sense of the unpredictable? How do we respond to forces beyond our control? By looking back at their stories, we gain a deeper understanding of our own relationship with nature and the enduring human drive to find meaning in the unknown. These lessons remind us that resilience isn't just about rebuilding, it's about learning, adapting, and growing together. If you found this journey into the past as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There's so much more to explore, and we're just getting started. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.